This is Reuters.
There is progress in talks to end the strikes at US automakers. That's according to people familiar with the negotiations. They say the United Auto Workers and Ford have narrowed their differences on pay following a new offer from the firm. Talks with Chrysler parent Stellantis and other companies have also reportedly been active. One source says UAW President Shawn Fain will now update union members on Friday.
Our cause is just, striking for a better future to protect our communities and to defeat corporate greed.
It's not clear whether he'll order a fresh round of walkouts or declare that sufficient progress has been made to avoid any escalation. Earlier this week, Ford said it had made a comprehensive new offer that included a general pay increase of over 20%. But other sticking points are thought to remain, including overpay and union representation at future battery plants. There were also signs that the companies are digging in for a long battle, with General Motors moving to secure $6 billion in new credit. The company called it a prudent move following union warnings that the strike could drag on for months. GM said significant gaps remained in its talks with unions. The targeted action against the Detroit 3 automakers began in mid-September. It's the first time the trio has faced simultaneous strike action.
About 75,000 workers at U.S. healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente started a 3-day strike on Wednesday. It's the largest ever strike in American healthcare. Those walking off the job include nurses, medical technicians, and other support staff at hundreds of hospitals across California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. A coalition of unions says the firm has failed to address staffing shortages, leaving medics overworked and underpaid. Nurse Juan Ratana was on the picket line outside one Los Angeles hospital.
Yeah, we're out here because we want the world to know that Kaiser's being unfair to us. They're not treating us right. We're working through the pandemic. We're working through hard times. We're understaffed, underpaid. They're not giving us what we need to take care of our patients properly.
Kaiser says hospitals and emergency departments will remain open. They'll be staffed by doctors, managers, and contingency workers. But the action is another sign of wider, growing labor unrest in the United States. Unions have become bolder about asking for better pay and benefits as inflation soars. Cardiology lab worker Armando Velasco says it's a reasonable request.
It's ridiculous that we're asking for 6% and Kaiser doesn't want to give it. Yeah, it's not even fair. We're not asking to be part of the millionaire club. We're just asking to be part of the society and be able to afford gas without having to go 2 jobs. That's all we're asking. That's fair.
The company and unions both said that talks were ongoing, with negotiators working through the night.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday appealed a judge's refusal to dismiss the New York civil fraud lawsuit against him and his family business. The appeal came on the 3rd day of Trump's fraud trial, as the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination sat in a Manhattan courtroom, away from the campaign trail.
I'm here, stuck here, and I can't campaign. I'd rather be right now in Iowa. I'd rather be in New Hampshire, South Carolina, or Ohio, or a lot of other places, but I'm stuck here.
New York Attorney General Letitia James accuses Trump, his sons Donald Jr. and Eric, the Trump Organization, and others of inflating property values over a decade, and Trump's net worth by up to $2.2 billion, in an effort to obtain favorable terms from banks and insurers. James is seeking at least $250 million in fines, and wants Trump and his adult sons permanently banned from running businesses in New York. The trial comes after the judge found Trump, his adult sons, and 10 of his companies liable for fraud, citing, quote, conclusive evidence that Trump inflated his fortune. The judge has since ordered the cancellation of certificates that let some of Trump's businesses, including the Trump Organization, operate in New York. The appeals process could extend beyond the trial, which could last into December.
Republicans Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan threw their hats in the ring to become the next U.S. House Speaker on Wednesday.
We need to pass the bills that need to be passed.
The yeas are 216.
After Kevin McCarthy was ousted the day before, in a historic first.
Is hereby declared vacant.
Scalise is the number 2 Republican in the House. The 57-year-old has been getting treatment for cancer and has long been considered McCarthy's heir apparent. He's also seen as more conservative than McCarthy. Jordan, who's 59, is a former college wrestler known as a leading antagonist of Joe Biden and is involved in the impeachment inquiry against the Democratic president. He's a vocal supporter of Donald Trump and has tangled with prosecutors who have filed criminal cases against the former president.
Congressman.
Representative Kevin Hern has also said he's considering a bid for the speakership.
I think we need to be pointing our guns outward, not at each other.
The chair declares.
Representative Patrick McHenry is filling in for now. Any contender is likely in for a messy battle to fill the post in the Republican-controlled House.
Good evening, all.
McCarthy isn't the only one who's had a hard time navigating the role.
I do not regret negotiating.
Paul Ryan was the last Republican speaker. He retired from Congress after struggling to work with Trump. His predecessor, John Boehner, left after clashes with the party's right wing.
I will resign as Speaker of the House.
This latest leadership fight is playing out with the clock ticking for lawmakers to extend government spending before it expires on November 18th. McCarthy's reliance on Democratic votes to pass a stopgap spending bill
Chaos is Speaker McCarthy.
is what set off the move by a rebellious faction of hard-right Republicans to oust him. They, along with the rest of Republicans, will choose their next speaker candidate on October 11th.
When he began his job as U.S. House Speaker in January, Kevin McCarthy had no idea of the wild ride he was in for. 9 months later, it ended in a historic fall after a small group of hardline Republicans narrowly won a vote to oust him.
I will not run for Speaker again.
Here's a look at how he got here.
Leader, are you going to stay in the race, Leader McCarthy?
Yes, I'm not going anywhere.
At the beginning of the year, McCarthy was intent on winning the speakership and did so in the 15th round of voting over 4 days. But it happened only after McCarthy made some concessions, like agreeing to a demand by hardliners that any lawmaker would be able to call for his removal at any time. Coupled with his narrow 221 to 212 majority, that made it relatively easy for a single hard-right member to call for his ouster. The second decision, which led to his removal, came on Saturday, when McCarthy opted to avert triggering a partial government shutdown by introducing a stopgap funding bill that passed the House with more Democratic than Republican votes. That sparked a revolt led by Republican Matt Gaetz.
Chaos is Speaker McCarthy,
who was irked by McCarthy's failure to achieve deep spending cuts in that temporary measure.
You know, it was personal. It had nothing to do about spending.
McCarthy steered a narrow majority through a long spring standoff that saw the U.S. come close to defaulting on its $31.4 trillion in debt. Members of his own party repeatedly rejected measures McCarthy brought to the floor. But in the end, he forced President Joe Biden to negotiate a deal. Questions swirled as to what that would mean for McCarthy.
Do you worry that someone, because any one of them could, would bring a motion to vacate?
Not at all.
Worried about losing their...
Not at all.
Democrats, meanwhile, were angry after McCarthy backed out of the May deal with Biden on spending levels. They grew angrier when he launched an impeachment inquiry into Biden. Here's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
This is an illegitimate impeachment inquiry. Period. Full stop.
McCarthy isn't a standalone case, though. His ouster demonstrates a recent challenge that's overshadowed the Speaker's post for Republicans in recent years. John Boehner resigned from the post in 2015 after a struggle with rebellious conservatives.
I leave with no regrets, no burdens.
What changed your mind in terms of running for Speaker?
Now, several Republicans could enter a lengthy and likely messy battle to fill the vacant post in the House.
Yes!
The U.S. House finds itself in an unprecedented situation. It won't have a leader for at least a week after Kevin McCarthy became the first ever House Speaker to be booted from the job by rebellious Republicans. What's next for the country? And how might the rebellion impact the grand old party? Until a new speaker is installed, it's unlikely Congress will take action on bills to fund the government. That legislative halt comes as another government shutdown deadline looms on November 18th. But with Republicans needing a week to choose a new speaker, it would stall talks on government funding. Hard-right conservatives like House Representative Matt Gaetz, who called for McCarthy's ouster, were angry over the then-speaker's failure to win extremely deep spending cuts in those funding bills. But if the eventual goal in removing McCarthy is to shut down the U.S. government, Princeton University professor Sean Wilentz says that tactic could backfire on the GOP, as it did only a few decades ago with Newt Gingrich.
If this is a prelude to shutdown, historically shutdowns have not been very productive for the party that shuts down the Congress. I mean, this happened in the 90s, which is really the beginning of this history in some ways with Gingrich. And, the Republicans unleashed Gingrich thinking that he would do a good job against the Democrats, and then he decided to take the whole country down with him with two shutdowns that basically reelected Bill Clinton in 1996. So if you're going back on that precedent, if I was a Democrat, I'd say go ahead. The only problem is that we have to live with the effects of a government shutdown, which are very, very dire. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be the party that benefits from that, because everybody's going through a disaster. Much worse now even than in the 90s.
For now, the House has selected an acting speaker, Republican Patrick McHenry, a McCarthy ally. But he really only has one task: to find a new speaker. Anything more than that, and it would spark another rebellion from the hard right. A date for the next speaker election is set whenever leaders of both parties decide they're ready to enter the process of electing a speaker. Normally, the elections for speaker are scheduled at the start of the new Congress every 2 years. Multiple Republicans said they plan to meet on October 10th to discuss possible McCarthy successors, with a vote on a new speaker planned for October 11th. The deep divisions in the GOP were on display in January, as McCarthy for days could not get enough votes to win the speaker position and had to endure 15 ballots. Things could be as chaotic this time around for the Republicans, unless they unite after concluding the chaos has sparked public backlash and dimmed their election prospects in 2024.
The parents of disgraced FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried arrived for the second day of his trial in Manhattan Wednesday, where lawyers and prosecutors clashed over the question of why their son's exchange collapsed, due to massive fraud or whether he simply made mistakes. Sitting in court in a suit, tie, and uncharacteristic trim haircut, Bankman-Fried was portrayed by his attorney on Wednesday as a math nerd who overlooked risk management in building FTX but did not steal customer money. While prosecutor Thane Wren said Bankman-Fried committed, quote, fraud on a massive scale, took more than $10 billion from unsuspecting customers, and doubled down to plug losses at his hedge fund Alameda Research when its crypto investments began to lose steam last year. 3 other central questions were raised as points of contention in the trial, which may last up to 6 weeks. 1. Was the collapse of FTX due to fraud or a smear job? Defense lawyer Mark Cohen said the Bahamas-based FTX was a casualty of a broader downturn across the cryptocurrency sector, and public attacks from rivals such as Binance and the crypto press led to a run on FTX. The prosecutor said that was an excuse for fraud. Another point of contention were ties with Alameda nefarious or business as usual. The jurors also heard from the prosecution that Bankman-Fried stole customer funds in 2 ways: by duping FTX customers into sending money intended for their trading accounts to Alameda, and through a secret special privilege embedded in FTX software that let Alameda make unlimited withdrawals. Cohen said prosecutors had misconstrued instances of Alameda performing functions for FTX and disagreed the software was nefarious. The prosecution and defense also clashed over the role of Caroline Ellison, Alameda chief executive and Bankman-Fried's on-and-off romantic partner, whether she was to blame for some of the wrongdoing or just a front for Bankman-Fried to carry out his actions at Alameda Research. Prosecutors are expected to call Ellison and 2 former members of Bankman-Fried's inner circle executives Nishad Singh and Gary Wang to testify against him. All three have pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Jurors can expect to hear from Wang by the end of the week.
Today, I'm announcing my administration has approved an additional $9 billion in relief for 125,000 borrowers in just the past few weeks under that program. With the latest debt cancellation in total, my administration has canceled $127 billion in student debts for nearly 3.6 million Americans. This kind of relief is life-changing for individuals and their families, but it's good for our economy as a whole as well. Next, we fixed what's called the income-driven repayment program. And here's how that works. If you have an undergraduate loan, after 20 years of straight paying, not missing paying the debt on a monthly basis, whatever is left of your loan is forgiven after 20 years. But because of administrative failures, some people who did pay their loans for 20 years or more did not get the debt relief they had earned. We fixed that and made sure borrowers got credit for every single payment they made. My administration is doing everything it can to deliver student debt relief to as many as we can, as fast as we can. This is in contrast to House Republicans who helped block the previous debt relief plan and nearly shut down the government over the extreme demands, which would have hurt hard-working families.
Abortion access and women's rights are now in the spotlight of Argentina's presidential election race. The election frontrunner, Javier Milei, opposes abortion. He wants to hold a referendum on whether the 2020 legalization of abortion before the 14th week of pregnancy should be repealed. He also wants to shut the Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity, which he has called a type of affirmative action that is degrading towards women. Milei's stance has caused fears among feminists of a risk of backtracking on gains in women's rights in recent years, but it has helped him win votes among young Argentine men who feel disenfranchised, as well as conservative female voters. Valentina Brites is an 18-year-old student who supports Milei.
Javier Milei does not hate women. What Javier proposes is equality on the basis of the law. When I attend law classes, I realise the laws are there. The laws are there to protect us, and there's no need for a ministry or something to represent us, because the laws already represent us.
Milei's critics accused him of ignoring the existence of gender violence and discrimination in Argentina. Last year, a woman was murdered every 35 hours. Women earn 27% less than men. Women like feminist activist Nelly Borquez marched in Buenos Aires late September to mark International Safe Abortion Day. Many wore green and waved green handkerchiefs, an echo of earlier protests that contributed to the 2020 law change on abortion.
Milei is someone who is another example of patriarchy but wants to push back our rights. But he's going to find us back on the streets.
Argelén Mazina, the country's women's minister, said she had invited Milei to the ministry to learn about its work, but he had declined.
He doesn't want Ministry of Women because he doesn't believe in equality. He doesn't believe in social justice. He doesn't believe that gender violence exists.
One of Milei's closest contenders is Patricia Bullrich, who is the most high-profile female candidate. She would leave abortion law unchanged, though also close the women's ministry. She said she would prioritize fighting femicide, narrowing the wage gap and improving women's health care. Silvia Lospanato, who is leading Bullrich gender policy, said Bullrich offered a middle ground between what she saw as Milei's anti-feminist stance and the government's overly bureaucratic model. Argentina has led the region in progressive policies on gender equality and LGBT rights for years. In 1991, it was the first Latin American country to implement a gender quota law in politics. It legalized same-sex marriage in 2010.
Here, in the remote outback of Australia's Northern Territory, is Arayonga, one of the indigenous communities the country's upcoming referendum is supposed to give a voice to. But as Reuters discovers, the Voice campaign is struggling to connect with some of the people it's aiming to help. The nationwide vote seeks to change Australia's constitution to recognise the Aboriginal and Torres Strait people and create a voice to Parliament to give them a channel for advising the government on matters affecting Indigenous Australians. Yet, in Arayonga, schoolteacher Tana Andrews says there are members of her small community who don't know the details of the proposal.
Some people are a bit confused what it means, yes and no, like especially the old people. And some young, because community really need more information.
Andrews explains the problems the community has long faced: a lack of jobs, health services, safe housing, and now a lack of communication on a vote that supporters say could change the community's future.
Aboriginal people have not been treated well because there are no changes. It needs to be changed. Like the community, we don't see people coming from the government, coming and talking about what we need. We never had anyone coming out.
The Voice proposal began with the 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart, a roadmap for Indigenous relations with wider Australia. Supporters say it will bring much-needed progress to First Nations communities. But the latest polls show the October 14 referendum is on track to be defeated. Some in the no camp want the country to prioritise nationwide economic issues, while others say it's unclear what the proposal really covers and believes it's racially divisive, including some in the community, like Aboriginal artist Kathy Coulthart.
I think I'll vote no. I think it'll divide Australians. It's very unsure. No one knows what's going to happen, how it's going to happen.
Some Indigenous people say it doesn't go far enough. Meanwhile, experts also cite misinformation as a big problem for The Voice. And reaching out to Indigenous Australia can be challenging. Communities are scattered over vast distances and speak more than 150 languages. The Central Land Council is at the forefront of the area's Yes campaign. CEO Les Turner said there had been dozens of information sessions about The Voice across the southern part of the Northern Territory.
We've done it in 8 different languages and translated what the referendum is, and that's, available on our website. But it's also upon all Australians to find out what the referendum's about, what it means.
Still, during Reuters' visit to the area, several said they had not even heard about the vote. Over in the more developed Hermannsburg community, where there are better internet services, Conrad Ratara highlighted another problem.
They just sent a piece of paper. I can't read. Some people can't read. Some people can hear what you're talking about. We need people to come.
A Central Land Council spokeswoman said the group has since also hosted sessions in Hermannsburg and Arayonga. Indigenous Australians make up about 3.8% of the population today. Under colonial government policies, they lost homelands and children suffered forced separation from their parents until well into the 20th century. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said he hopes the referendum will help close glaring gaps in socio-economic outcomes between Indigenous and wider Australia. But with the vote fast approaching, some in the community, like Conrad Ratara, fear it may be lost because many people simply don't understand it. Phoenix, Arizona set another weather record this year, its driest ever monsoon season. That's according to the National Weather Service Phoenix, which has been tracking rainfall since 1895. Usually, the area sees thunderstorms from the middle of June through September. Here's NWS lead meteorologist Gabriel Lojero.
It's officially been listed as the driest monsoon season on record for Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, where we've only received 0.15 inches of rain throughout the entire monsoon season. So the driest that has been recorded before this year, you have to go all the way back to 1924, which we had 0.36 inches of rain at Phoenix Sky Harbor.
According to Lojero, back then, Phoenix Sky Harbor still had 0.36 inches of rain, more than double this season's 0.15.
It's something that's extreme and hasn't been, seen before. But with climate change, this could become something that becomes more frequent, where the summers will have, extreme heat.
Arizona state climatologist Erin Saffel said summer rain is crucial for Arizona and the southwest region. Apart from being needed for farming and keeping wildfires at bay, Saffel said it's important that there's enough water in the soil.
We need to have soil moisture at higher levels in the summer so that when our snow melts in the winter, it doesn't just go right into the ground, and instead it will run off into our rivers.
It was also the hottest summer for Phoenix, with temperatures hitting at least 110 Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius for 31 days straight in July. Saffel said that kind of heat would happen only about 5 days a year in the early 1900s.
Japan started releasing the second batch of treated radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant on Thursday. The release by the Tokyo Electric Power Company will last for about 2.5 weeks, discharging some 7,800 cubic meters of wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. The initial release in late August sparked concern among some neighboring countries, with China being one of the staunchest critics of the move. It even triggered a blanket ban on Japanese seafood products by China. TEPCO said it had received more than 6,000 harassment calls from abroad between August 24th and 27th, alleging that many appear to originate from China. Nuclear authorities, including the United Nations nuclear watchdog, have said the wastewater release will have negligible impact on human health and the environment. The discharge is seen as a key step to decommissioning the nuclear power plant, which suffered meltdowns after being hit by a tsunami in 2011. It was the world's worst nuclear plant disaster since Chernobyl 25 years earlier.
Hello? Yes?
A United Nations mandated investigation into continuing atrocities in Ethiopia is facing closure. That's after a UN website on Wednesday showed that no motion has been received to renew it. Thousands died in a 2-year conflict, between the government and forces from the Tigray region, which formally came to an end last year. Both sides accuse each other of atrocities, including massacres, rape, and arbitrary detentions. Each side has denied responsibility for systemic abuses. The UN Human Rights Council created the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia in 2021, after a motion was submitted by the European Union. Last month, it said that war crimes and crimes against humanity were still being committed in Ethiopia. However, strong African opposition appears to have deterred proponents from seeking another mandate, diplomats have said. The mandate was only renewed last year by a small margin. Lucy McKernan of human rights advocacy organisation Human Rights Watch said that no resolution in the face of the experts' recent findings was scandalous. Ethiopia denies committing widespread abuses and has strongly opposed the probe. It has promoted its own national justice policies as the preferred avenue of investigation, an approach the UN Human Rights Commission described as deeply flawed. In analysis released on Tuesday, the Commission concluded that there is a high risk that atrocities will continue. It cited conflict in the Amhara region in recent months and the Ethiopian government's failure to hold people accountable for crimes committed in the Tigray War.
A 16-year-old girl is in critical condition in Tehran after falling into a coma on Sunday following a confrontation with agents on the metro for violating the hijab law. That's according to two prominent rights activists who spoke to Reuters on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the matter. CCTV footage shared by state news agency IRNA shows Armida Garavan without the mandatory hijab. She is accompanied by two female friends, walking towards the train. Upon entering the cabin, one of the girls is seen immediately backing off and reaching for the ground. Another girl is then dragged unconscious from the cabin by passengers. Reuters could not immediately verify the authenticity of the footage. Garavan's case is raising concerns she may face the same fate as Masa Amini, the 22-year-old woman whose death while in the custody of morality police sparked nationwide protests. Authorities denied the claims by rights groups. In a televised interview, her parents said that their daughter had suffered a drop in blood pressure, lost her balance, and hit her head inside the metro cabin. I've seen the pictures of the subway, so I don't think what people say is accurate. I've seen the subway's CCTV footage completely. I saw how she fell and how her friends dragged her out. There was nothing special, that they wanted to make something out of it. I just appreciate them praying for my child's health. Rights groups on social media have called on authorities to publish the footage from inside the cabin, claiming that her parents' statement was made under duress.
This is what rescuers in the Canary Islands have described as the most crammed migrants boat they've seen. The wooden vessel arrived in Algeria on Tuesday, carrying an astonishing 271 migrants. It had reportedly arrived from Senegal. The Red Cross group that attended those on board said this was the record number of arrivals in a single boat at the Spanish archipelago. According to authorities, a total of 726 migrants, including women and children, have reached the Canary Islands in the past 24 hours. It's become a primary destination for migrants attempting to reach Spain, which has seen a sharp increase in migrants' crossings from Senegal and other African countries this year. There were 21,780 arrivals from January to August, a 15% rise from 2022. September's calmer waters have made it a peak month for such crossings, presenting significant challenges for authorities and humanitarian groups.
Amazon and Microsoft face yet another antitrust investigation in Europe. This time the US tech giants are in hot water with Britain's media regulator, Ofcom. On Thursday, it asked the country's antitrust authority to investigate the two companies' dominance in the UK cloud market. Ofcom said its study found features that made it harder for UK businesses to use multiple cloud suppliers. In April, it said it was worried about the practices of Amazon Web Services and Microsoft because of their market position. Ofcom said the companies had up to 80% combined market share of UK public cloud infrastructure services last year. Businesses told Ofcom they were concerned about it being too difficult to switch or mix and match cloud providers. Amazon said it disagreed with the move on Thursday, and the firm argued Ofcom's findings were based on a fundamental misconception of how the IT sector works. Microsoft said it was committed to ensuring the UK cloud industry remained highly competitive. Britain's Competition and Markets Authority, or CMA, will lead the investigation. It welcomed Ofcom's move and said many businesses now completely relied on cloud services, meaning it was essential to have effective competition in a market worth more than $9 billion. The CMA said it would conclude its investigation by April 2025.
From why Mark Zuckerberg thinks you can never have too many chatbots to what former Apple designer Johnny Ive is dreaming up now. This is Generation AI. Meta has unveiled a host of new chatbots that will work in its social media applications.
Meta AI is your basic assistant, right? That you can talk to like a person, right? You can message Meta AI and any of the messaging apps, WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram, Direct.
Meta says other bots will have the personalities of celebrities, including snowboarding champion Chloe Kim. Boss Mark Zuckerberg also rolled out new AI products, including a mixed reality headset and Ray-Ban smart glasses. ChatGPT maker OpenAI could be teaming up with former Apple designer Johnny Ive. That's according to the Financial Times. It says they're in talks to build the iPhone of artificial intelligence, fueled by funding from Japanese conglomerate SoftBank. Discussions were said to be serious, but the report added it could be months before a venture is formally announced. Microsoft boss Satya Nadella says tech giants are in a battle. It's for the vast troves of data needed to train AI. Nadella was testifying in an antitrust case against Google. He complained Google is locking up content with expensive and exclusive deals with publishers. There is a new prediction from SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son. The major tech investor says he bets AI surpassing human intelligence in most areas will come within 10 years, and he thinks that's just the start. Son says artificial superintelligence will come in 20 years and exceed human ability by a factor of 10,000. And LinkedIn is the latest to tap into AI technology. The tech will allow recruiters to find job candidates by asking questions using natural language. The Microsoft-owned social network has been using tech from ChatGPT creator OpenAI to develop the features.
World government bonds went through an unrelenting sell-off on Wednesday, and that has driven US 30-year Treasury yields to 5% for the first time since 2007, while German 10-year yields were at 3%. Those moves could speed up a global slowdown, hurting stocks and corporate bonds. It comes with a growing sense that interest rates in major economies will stay higher for longer to contain inflation. And ever-resilient US economic data and a sharp unwinding of traders' positions for a bond rally have also hit home. The US Treasury market is considered the bedrock of the global financial system. It's seen 10-year yields jump 20 basis points to 4.8% this week alone. They are up almost 100 basis points this year, having jumped over 200 last year. Bond yields move in the other direction to prices, and asset managers who had held these bonds, expecting prices to rally, are now giving up. One leading analyst told Reuters there was huge momentum behind the sell-off in treasuries because positioning in the market has been wrong. Both US and German yields were up, while Australian and Canadian 10-year bond yields also surged over 20 basis points this week. British 30-year government bond yields hit a fresh 25-year high, above 5% on Wednesday too. The speed of the bond rout caused alarm across equity markets. That drove the safe haven dollar to its highest in months against the euro, pound and Japanese yen. World stocks also hit their lowest since April on Wednesday.
Authorities managed to retrieve just one body on Tuesday from a collapsed mine in Zimbabwe. That's amid an ongoing search for survivors still trapped underground. The disused 700-metre deep mine in Timbuktu, more than 60 miles west of the capital Harare, collapsed on Friday. As the days have passed, dozens of family members have gathered at the site. But for many, Tuesday's solitary retrieval added to their dwindling hopes that their loved ones will make it out. Accidents in disused mines are common in Zimbabwe, where artisanal and small-scale miners defy authorities by mining in old shafts that are prone to collapse. It's been more than a decade since jihadist militants captured Mali's Timbuktu, but the city, a centuries-old centre of Islamic learning, is again under siege, raising fears that Mali is descending into chaos. Al-Qaeda-affiliated insurgents began a blockade of Timbuktu in August, cutting road access and shutting off river and air routes. Then, the bombing began. On September 21st, witnesses said rockets hit a hospital, killing 2 children. Timbuktu businessman Sori Toure says the shelling is what worries people most.
This creates a real psychosis and leaves its mark on people's minds. I myself have this fear inside me. What's much more serious is the fact that it affects people's psychology.
Back in 2012, a Tuareg rebellion was overtaken by jihadists who captured Timbuktu and pressed south towards the capital Bamako. The advance was halted by French forces and United Nations peacekeepers. But there will be no such intervention now. Mali's military rulers have severed ties with France and kicked its troops out of the country. In June, it ordered the UN's 13,000-strong force to leave. Since then, the Al-Qaeda-affiliated JNIM has launched its offensive in central Mali. Fighting has resumed between the army and Tuareg rebels from the north. Islamic State allied insurgents have continued to carry out attacks in the east. Russia's Wagner Group, which has sent 1,000 mercenaries to support the junta, has failed to fill the gap.
It's hard to see who might come to Mali's rescue this time.
Ulf Lessing, head of the Sahel program at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, said there is a risk of civil war.
People are obviously, in panic or getting worried. Many are leaving. And it might get worse because the UN, the peacekeeping force is still there, helping a bit of, to achieve a bit of stability. But once they're out, then violence might really, spike.
More than 650 people have died in conflict in Mali in the 2 months after the UN began its withdrawal. That's a 40% rise over the previous 2 months, the US-based Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project said. Mali's authorities, who consolidated power in coups in 2020 and 2021, did not respond to specific requests for comment. On Monday, however, the army released a statement describing September as a turbulent month and said it would continue fighting its enemies. After being confirmed as interim president in May 2021, coup leader Colonel Assimi Goïta had this to say.
We had to choose between the stability of Mali and chaos, and we chose stability.
Instead, with the country internationally isolated, Mali now appears to be in meltdown. And in a region already reeling from several military coups, the violence creates a further risk of instability. Thousands took to the streets of Accra on Tuesday demanding Ghana's central bank governor resign. This protest is the latest show of frustration over rising living costs and unemployment in one of West Africa's largest economies.
I want to make history. I want to tell Akufo-Addo, it's enough, oh, it's enough.
Many in the crowds, which converged on the central bank's head office, were dressed in red and black. Those are colours traditionally worn at funerals.
There's no progress. There's nothing.
Businessman Alhaji Guntu said the youth are particularly affected.
They are suffering. The suffering is too much. The suffering is too much.
In July, the Bank of Ghana posted a record loss of 60.8 billion cedi, or about $5.3 billion for 2022. That was mostly due to debt restructuring, which is a condition of a $3 billion International Monetary Fund loan program. Last month, Central Bank Governor Ernest Addison said policies under the IMF deal were yielding results, and that improved economic indicators would soon lead to higher incomes and purchasing power. However, a stable exchange rate, lower inflation, and more robust growth have not yet helped those struggling to make ends meet.
Oh, sorry, boys. Thanks, everyone.
This is a historic day. For 7 decades, Australians have seen a queen on their coins. This will be the first time for most Australians that they have held a circulating coin which has a king on it rather than a queen.
Oswald Reuters is controlling this robotic arm through a headset, reading his brain waves. The 68-year-old suffered a stroke back in 2014. It paralyzed him on his left side, and he couldn't speak. After years of therapy, he can talk again, but his motor skills are limited.
Smells good, though.
I can't go into my backyard without my brace on, and I can't do anything like normal men do, like changing the air filter in my AC unit, standing on the ladder. You know, I can't do anything, any of that anymore.
Now, he's hoping this technology will help him recover the use of his arm.
Here we go again.
And the University of Houston says he's the first person in the world to make use of what might become a novel medical device at home. The device, from the University of Houston and TIRR Memorial Hermann Hospital in Texas, is undergoing clinical trials. It works like this. When the headset detects that Reuters wants to move his arm, it moves the robotic limb, but not entirely. He still needs to make an effort with his own arm to complete the motion. Repetition is key. The headset's designers say those calls and responses between the brain, the body, and robotic movement help rewire a stroke victim's brain to gradually regain control of their limb.
Good job.
A process called neuroplasticity. Dr. Gerard Francisco is the clinical lead.
Therapy is still the most important way that we can help people recover from a stroke. Exercise, repetition. Robots will provide a repetitive, predictable movement. Robots will not get tired, so that it can provide the necessary amount of repetitions, because we know that certain amount of repetition is required in order for us to rewire that part of the brain that is responsible for movement.
Since Reuters' mother and brother also died from strokes, he was eager to help its designers.
Anything that will help a person like me I think is a godsend. People, if they can get the price down, and if the insurance companies will say yes instead of no, it will help a lot of people.
UK startup Odin Space has developed in-orbit impact detectors that it says can help track tiny pieces of space junk. Collision with even the smallest invisible debris can cause significant damage to other satellites and spacecrafts.
The simple answer is yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's getting much more dangerous. So it's an exponential problem. Debris generates more debris.
Full power. Thousands of commercial satellites are being launched into the Earth's orbit at a record pace, driving up the risk of collisions and create hazardous debris. Efforts to track the smallest piece of debris have proved impossible until now. Odin Space have devised a lightweight detector system that can identify pieces of junk as small as 0.1 millimeters, even when it's traveling at thousands of meters per second. Odin Space co-founder and chief operating officer, Dan Terrett.
So Odin Space is about mapping the 99% of debris that is just too small for the existing technology in space. It travels so quickly that
and then we have these sensors on the corners of these frames that listen to those vibrations, and then we look at that data and we can analyze that data to tell you how big a piece of debris was, how fast it's traveling, what direction it's traveling in, and we do all that from those signals, from those acoustic signals.
Panels are designed to be hosted on board other operators' spacecraft or satellites, creating a network of sensors providing a real-time picture of an orbit's environment. The company launched its first sensors on board an Italian small satellite launch vehicle orbiting the poles in June 2023 and will begin gathering debris data in October.
Our priority is to find out how much debris is in each orbit. Once we know how much there is and where it is, then we can start to look a little bit deeper. We can start to say, okay, this is how big it is, this is how fast it's traveling. That allows us to tell people how dangerous that debris is. You don't just want to know where it is, you want to know what it's going to do to you when it strikes your satellite.
Obviously, it's always hard not to have the cast because I know they're so proud of the movie and I'm so proud of them, but I completely support the strike, obviously, and so whatever it takes, it takes.
I think it's incredibly difficult. For us, we definitely support people's right to strike, and we feel like that is all workers' rights. But I do think that it definitely has had some very dramatic effects, not just here in the UK, but across the world. And so for us, we just really hope that these conditions can be met and the strike can be resolved soon so that everyone can get back to work.
You'll go home.
Honestly, home doesn't mean the same for me as it does for you and Felix.
Well, why don't you come home with me?
I see why Felix likes you so much. You're so, real.
I just wanted to kind of explore our relationship with the things that we want. I think all of us feel very complicated about the things that we want. We love them and we hate them. So I wanted to make a kind of sexy summer thriller, the kind of like the ones I grew up with, that sort of explored that desire.
هذه استخدمتها تروس بسكليت، حولتها من تروس لهاي هات،
وهاي سنير بسموها في الدرمز الحقيقي، وأنا حولتها من طنجرة وصورة إشعة وتبتها ببراغي وزبط صوتها. وهذا توم 1 وهذا توم 2، فاستخدمتهن جرادل وقفتهم على خشب فكان يعني صوتهم حلو. وهاي صينية كنا نقدم فيها شاي للناس فاستخدمتها بدل الكراش. فمكوناته يعني انتم شايفين خشب، زنبرك، سيخ حديد، البكرة، جنزير، بسكليت. أنا حلمي أطور من حالي، أدرس في معاهد برا، أزيد خبرة في الموسيقى. وكان يعني حلمي إنه أجيب آلة، فعملت الآلة هاي البسيطة عشان أظني على الموسيقى وأظني يعني مكمل وممارس على الموسيقى.
عملنا بموهبة حسام، فصورنا مقاطع على برنامج التيك توك نزلناها، فلقينا قبلية على الفيديوهات فوصلت المشاهدات فوق المليون ونص. فهذا زاد الاشي تطور وحبينا اكثر انه نطور منها.
We give them a group of 6 to 8 cocktails where 4 will be chosen on the day of. And it's about teaching them, ways of working and just understanding how to build those drinks fast.
We started just as trying to create a platform for women to stand on in a male-dominated industry.
Well, hosting a World Cup in Saudi Arabia would mean everything to us. We are a football nation, and this is what dreams are made of. For all the generations, young and old, boys and girls. The 2034 World Cup is our invitation to the world to witness Saudi Arabia's development, experience its welcoming society, culture and heritage, and become part of its history.
This is Reuters.